Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lesser Known But Awesome Heroes. And today, guys, I'm actually going to do a little bit of condensing, which every once in a while I have to do this for a character. I really don't want to. I want to get into the full history, but this character, as you can tell, having the long history that he and she and whatnot does, it would take like 3 or 4 parts, especially considering the way that I speak. So today, guys, I'm going to do some condensing, but I'm going to try to give you as much history as I can on the many interpretations of the DC superhero known as Swamp Thing. So let's get underway, guys. There have been many interpretations, so let me do the rundown and all the usual stuff that I usually do. So there was Alex Olson, the original, who debuted in House of Secrets issue 92 in July of 1971. Alec Holland, the one that we know, Swamp Thing #1 in October to November of 1972. Albert Hollerer, it's German. I'm very bad at pronouncing foreign names, so it's actually German. Swamp Thing Volume 2, issue 47 in May of 1986. Tiffy Holland, who debuted in Swamp Thing Volume 2, issue 65 in 1987. Alan Hallman, kind of humorous, Swamp Thing Volume 2, issue 102 in December of 1990. And Aaron Haley, who debuted in the one-shot Swamp Thing-esque graphic novel known as Swamp Thing Roots in 1998. And the character overall was created by Bernie Wrightson and Lin Win. The team affiliations have been the Gray, the White Lantern Corps, to a certain extent the Red, and the Parliament of Trees. And have had actually big partnership connections with Buddy Baker, Animal Man, and John Constantine. Now that I got all of that out of the way, every Swamp Thing, to basically put it in perspective, every Swamp Thing actually, as an initiation to become the Swamp Thing, the Parliament of Trees wanted to create a guardian. They were, in a sense, the Parliament of Trees were a council that helped the Green. The Green is basically the entity in the DC universe that controls all plant life. And so they needed an avatar, a guardian for that. And thus, the Swamp Things were basically created. However, every era, there had to be a Swamp Thing. Every 10 or 20 years or so. In chronological order, it was Alex Olson, Albert Hollerer, then it was Aaron Haley, and then it was... Crap, I just now blanked out on the name. Yeah, it was Alan Hallman, and then it was Alec Holland, and then it was Tiffy Holland. I'm amazed that I actually remembered all that. Yay me. I usually forget that stuff, especially when I'm winging it. Alex Olson is unique because in House of Secrets, the original Swamp Thing, Alex Olson, was actually originally a one-shot horror story. And to give a little bit of information on that, Olson was actually a scientist living in the 20th century who was in love with a woman known as Linda. However, his assistant and best friend, Damian Ridge, did not, actually pined for Linda's affections and could not stand that the woman that he admired and loved and his best friend Olson were actually married. So Damian decided to actually tamper with the experiments that Olson was working on, and it caused a massive explosion that actually killed him and completely incinerated his corpse. And so then Ridge basically dumped the burnt remains into the swamp. This would start actually a trend in the DC continuity that became canon, where every avatar that became a Swamp Thing, Alec Holland, Alex Olsen, minus Tiffy Holland, all had to basically be burned in flames. So they had to basically be incinerated, and then the green would revitalize them in the swamp and make them pretty much the Swamp Thing. Now, what makes this even more interesting is that in this one-shot story, Olsen would actually come back to life as a swamp creature that could not really communicate. Rather, and sadly, Linda would actually die, and Olsen would actually get his revenge on Ridge, but this would be years later after Ridge comforted it and secretly, married Linda, and they had a child. This would actually be linked in continuity because of the fact that Alec Holland's first wife, Linda, Linda Hall. Take two. Linda Holland, there we go. Her original name before marrying Alec was actually Linda Ridge. So there was a connection between Damian Ridge and Linda being the current day descendant. Albert Hollerer was actually the World War II Swamp Thing, and he was actually a German pilot who got shot down and basically crashed, and his plane crashed and exploded, and he basically died due to the flames because he basically couldn't bail out of his plane in time. And so, being brain damaged a little bit from the crash too, the green basically revitalized him as, the Swamp Thing of that era. And in Swamp Thing roots, Aaron Haley, who was actually the Swamp Thing of the 40s and 50s. And then after that, there was Alan Hallman, who actually became a member of the evil entity known as the Gray. The Gray being the arch nemesis of the Green. And Alan was actually a scientist, and Alan was actually the one chosen before Alec Holland. And on the way to being interpreted to the Green, a creature of the Gray actually snuck in, snatched him up, and conformed him to a creature made of like mold and asbestos and fungi and whatnot. And actually later on, the Gray would actually send him after Tiffy Holland because Tiffy was... Man, I'll get into Tiffy in a second. So Alan ended up being a creature that would track down and actually fight Holland many times and would basically tell him, you need to surrender your individuality to the Gray. So he's the only, person to ever go towards the Green and be turned into a member of the Gray thus far in canon to the Swamp Thing mythos. And Alec Holland, and I'll get this out of the way since I'm looking at it right now. At one point, Swamp Thing during the Blackest Night event actually became known as the Dark Avatar. Believe it or not, during Blackest Night, even to a certain extent, Brightest Day, Swamp Thing had to be purged of the Black Lantern Corps ring. So that's another little tidbit. Now, Tiffy Holland is actually the spiritual daughter of Alec Holland. And ironically, her biological father was actually none other than John Constantine. Yeah, it's weird. Her spiritual father, in a sense, is Alec Holland. But I think the way that they describe it, and this is where it gets really weird, guys, is that Holland apparently injected like a piece or like enzyme or something into Constantine's dong or like sperm or something, and they actually, I realize that that's a bit graphic, but I'm trying to basically convey to you guys that he did something to John's like reproductive organs, and basically, Abigail Holland, who was originally Abigail, Arcane, was actually, John got her pregnant, and so spiritually, her real father, Tifi's real father, is actually Alec himself. And that John, by DNA wise, John is the father, but really it's Alec who's the father. I don't know. It's some Jerry Springer stuff. It confuses even me the more I try to explain it to you guys. But Tifi's the most interesting of all the Swamp Things, because she doesn't just have a connection to the green and control plant life, but she is a man-plant hybrid, which she can upset the balance. On top of that, a cool thing about Tifi is that she also, for some odd reason, the green actually brokered a deal with the red. The red being the part of the DC universe that controls all animals or is linked to animal life. Hence, Vixen and Buddy Baker and such. So Tifi actually not only Tifi's a major power player, if not threat, in the DC universe, because of the fact that she not only has connections to the green, but she has connections to the red as well. So she can actually call animals at will through telepathy, much like Aquaman. And she can soothe the calmest beast, or she can even, manipulate plant life. However, luckily she takes after her dear old dad and wanted to follow in his footsteps of not only protecting the swamp and the Parliament of Trees from the Grey, but she also pulls double duty working with Buddy and many others connected to the Red. So she's an overall kind of hero, which I like that about her character. But Alec Holland himself, and Tifi for many years actually, was being chased, and Alec had to try to protect her many times as a baby, especially from Anton Arcane. And that's actually something I need to talk about. I'm going to save the best for last here, guys, and actually talk about Alec Holland himself. Because, first off, I'm going to say something that most of you who are Swamp Thing fans or have very little awareness of, even I, growing up, watching the 90s TV show with Dick Durek, didn't even actually know this. But apparently, guys, Swamp Thing is not really Alec Holland. Because years later, they would actually reveal, I think right around 95 or so, somebody can actually quote me exactly on the year and the exact issue. Actually, as a matter of fact, let me look that up, just to be sure, because I actually have the page right here. But they revealed that actually, when Alec Holland died, he actually, because Alec Holland was working on, the hormonal formula that could help, strengthen plants, we all know the deal where, he got set on fire and he ran to the swamp and fell. But we always believed, origin-wise, that he mutated into Swamp Thing, but in fact, it was actually revealed, and even to the dismay of Swamp Thing himself, that actually Alec Holland was fully dead. And that in fact, actually, the Green used their mystical powers along with the formula that Holland actually had used, that it caused a weird alchemaic, symbol, or like concoction, if you will, where a giant mass of swamp algae and stuff gained sentience and actually became, the Swamp Thing that we know. But that, in an interesting twist, this mass actually absorbed all the memories and personality of Holland himself. And when this is revealed, it actually shook Swamp Thing to his core. Because for many years, he believed himself to actually be Holland. And when it was actually revealed that yeah, Alec Holland was actually officially dead, and that Swamp Thing was actually a sentient piece of vegetation that absorbed his memories and personality. It shook Swamp Thing, but it didn't shake him all that much. In fact, he went to the official burial site, looked at Holland's actual decayed corpse and bones and stuff, and he swore to Holland that he would continue to actually fight his fight and help, rid the world of those who want to do pollution and all the bad guys and all that stuff, like all the people that Holland really wanted to, like, help. And so rather than it hindering Swamp Thing a whole lot, it actually, at first, yeah, he was depressed and he isolated himself, but then, when it finally came time, as it always is in the superhero comics, very humorously, Swamp Thing made the decision that, you know what, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because this is what the real Alec Holland would want to do. So Swamp Thing's resolve as a hero was even more strengthened after the revelation than it was before. So, but going on here. And at one point, actually, even Alec was actually cut off from the green. Believe it or not, guys. He actually lost, at one point in the comics, a connection to green and thought that he was dead. So that was really something. And ironically, it was actually the Florana this and deduced it that Swamp Thing was actually playing. I thought it was, really Alec Holland. And it did send him into a mindless rage, and he did kill Sunderman and set off for the swamps. He did go into shock from learning his origins, but he rooted himself into the swamp and spent 3 weeks dreaming, his mind eventually traveling to the green. But there's a lot of stuff here, guys. But a lot of character stuff for Alec, a lot of stuff that deals with, the Crisis on Infinite Earths and stuff like that. But unfortunately, guys, I won't really get into all that. A lot of you may be disappointed or think I'm taking the cheap way out, but I think I've pretty much gone into really everything that needs to. Well, I guess I'll actually talk upon this last part, the avatar of the Gray, or the Gray itself, which is Mango, who was actually originally part of the Military, in a big epic fight to kill him, which was the equivalent of, basically, in biblical terms, Holland actually slayed Satan. In terms of, his character's mythology, Mango was Satan. And after that, that's where I'll just, trail it off, because it's a lot of hearsay and a lot of other stuff that I'm sure you guys can research on your own. But oh, and I almost actually forgot to mention, and I'm glad that I actually was looking to see if I missed anything. It's also worth mentioning that after he destroyed Mantango, and this is the last bit that I actually put, is that actually during Brightest Day, Holland actually would become the white entity. He would become the power source of the White Lanterns, or the only White Lantern on Earth. and that apparently Holland late during this time would gain crazy powers. He would gain the ability to breathe fire, control like air, wind, water, all the basic elements. Um, that he could actually at will use all the vegetation in the area and grow to like giant size, like a lot of ridiculous stuff. But I still feel that I should mention that last tidbit. But me personally, I like Swamp Thing just the way that he is controlling plant life and able to regenerate using fauna and all that stuff and whatnot. The usual stuff. Super strength and whatnot. But I feel that this is it, guys. This is where I'm going to actually break, the video off now. I'm sure you guys can do more research on your own. That's not me being lazy. That's just me doing consideration because I know most of you guys are probably busy. So with that, guys, this has been my video on Swamp Thing. Hopefully you guys actually enjoyed it. You learned quite a lot about Swampy. And as always, guys, stay tuned for the next one.